First, I want to invite those attendees who are here to be open with the Q&A section. If you have questions about things that are being brought up in the discussion, feel free to open your thoughts there. Our moderator and the panelists will be able to see those questions and answer them via message back or directly as a discussion topic. We'll go ahead and recognize some of our sponsors for this event who make it possible for us all to be here today. And that includes University of Georgia School of Law, University of Houston Law Center, UConn School of Law, and Southern University Law Center. Our next session here is the best schools for innovation, and I'm pleased to introduce our moderator today, Wendy Perdue. She is the Dean and Professor of Law at the University of Richmond School of Law. So I'll go ahead and pass the time over to her and the panelists. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew, and welcome to all of our attendees. And we welcome you to this session to talk about innovation in legal education. Let me begin by introducing the terrific panel we have for you today. We have Diana Bowman, Associate Dean at Arizona State University, Sandra Day O'Connor School of Law. Second, we have Darby Dickerson, Dean at Southwestern Law School. Third, Jason Jarvis, Associate Dean, Pepperdine Caruso School of Law. And fourth, Martin Pritikin, Dean and Vice President, Purdue University Concord Law School. So welcome to all our panelists. So innovation in legal education. Let's start with a broad question of what does it mean? What are we talking about? We talk about innovation in legal education. In different industries, it has a different connotation, but what does it mean in the context of law schools and legal education? Dean Pritikin, let me start off with you. What give us your take on what innovation means in the context of legal education?
To me, innovation means tailoring the law school experience and law school curriculum to what's changing with the legal profession, right? And also to developments in education generally. I think it's important for the audience to understand that a lot of what has gone on in legal education for the last century has largely been unchanged. At Harvard, Dean Charles Langdell founded the Socratic method, or certainly made it popular, and pretty much every other law school in the country followed suit. And for many, many decades, that model went largely unchanged. And the idea was that law was a science of principles that you could learn through systematic study of appellate opinions. And so the focus of law school became very much on thinking like a lawyer, right? That's the buzzword that always gets used. And, the reality is the practice of law is very different from what it was 50 years ago. And the science of educating adults is very different than it was 50 years ago. And so I think legal education, or I think the legal profession generally, has been a little slow to adopt innovations in technology or otherwise. And so when I think of innovation, and it can mean many, many different things, but I think of embracing the reality of change and be willing to adapt methods of that. Just to give one example of this, right? So I went to law school from 1997 to 2000. I went to Harvard Law School. I guess I got a good education. I did not know the first thing about practicing law when I graduated. And my law school, Concord, which is actually the nation's first fully online law school. And I should say, incidentally, it may be regarded as innovative just by virtue of the fact that it exists, right? Because in 1998, I still had dial-up internet, right? But we have a class in addition to a professional responsibility class called Future of Law Practice. And it exposes students to the technological, economic, sociological changes that are happening in the legal profession. And one of the main things they have to do is every student has to develop and orally present a business plan. Whether they plan on hanging out a shingle or not, we want them to go through that exercise of thinking about the business aspects of being a lawyer. And that was so far removed from my experience in law school, which, in other disciplines might not be considered particularly innovative, but in a legal curriculum, it's very different from what you would have seen 20 years ago. So I won't keep talking, but that's my sort of introduction, my thoughts at least, as to what innovation in legal education is.
Thank you. Dean Dickerson, what's your take on this?
Thank you. And it's great to be here. I want to echo that I agree with everything that Dean Pritikin just said, but I think that I would add on to it by saying that a lot of schools are also being innovative in the sense that they're thinking about what the students need outside of the classroom and the program of legal education. So many students are coming to law school who are first gen or simply don't have a model of what it means to be a legal professional. So a lot of schools are developing programs and developing other resources to help students. So for example, food pantries. We know that if a student is hungry, they're not going to be able to learn. Many of us have experiential opportunities, but we know our students might not have the professional wardrobe to go out to externships or part-time work every day. So we're setting those up. We know that students of college age and non-traditional students all want to have resources regarding wellness and mental health. And many of our campuses are bringing those types of programs to campus. We have mentorship programs, leadership programs. A lot of us are developing professional travel funds because we know we can't offer you everything, but maybe you see a conference in another city or another state and we can help you get it there. And then a lot of schools are also developing some things that are a little more co-curricular. So pro bono programs, public service programs, not only to allow you to give back, but to gain very valuable skills and connections in the legal profession. And then a little bit of a bridge, sometimes outside of the academic program, we see things such as technology literacy programs run by our law libraries or financial literacy program run by different departments in the law school.
Perfect. Thank you. Dean Jarvis, any thoughts you want to add on what do we mean by innovation in legal education?
I certainly agree, and thank you for having me. It's an honor to be on this panel with such amazing people. Maybe it'd be helpful a little bit to preview what non-innovation looks like for some of the audience, because Dean Pritikin was talking about this too. For most of us, we showed up in person to law school. We had a day or two of orientation where they kind of showed us where our classrooms were, maybe at a mock class or something, and the professor would call in people and kind of show them what the Socratic method looked like. And then you were sort of thrown to the wolves with your professors, and you basically had that for 3 years. And your first summer, you might get a job with a judge, or you might get something with the DA's office. And then your second summer, we all go off and do our big law firm jobs. But it wasn't until either you're clerking or you're working in a firm afterwards that, like Dean Pritikin was talking about, you actually started to learn how to practice law. Or even were taught any of the science of being in law school. And now I think, like probably our law school, I'm sure many of the others do, there's programs to kind of teach you how to hit the ground running when you start law school. What does IRAC mean before you even step into the classroom? What can you be expecting from a professor who does more lecture or one that does a Socratic method? How do you prepare yourself for exams? And so I know we're going to talk some about technology. I certainly love talking about technology too, but I think, one of the more important innovations in legal education is just giving students a little bit of a better ramp up to starting law school and understanding, what law practice is going to be like and what law school itself is going to be like.
Maybe you should tell people what IRAC is. I'm not sure.
Do I get to be the first one? Is this like the first time they've heard this? Issue, rule, analysis, conclusion. And I'm honored to be the first person to say that and say it out loud. Thank you, Dean.
Thank you, Dean Bowman.
Thank you so much for having me here. I'm just excited listening to my colleagues on the panel to think about what law school looks like today. These were not what I had when I was in law school in Australia, and I think it's a really exciting time for this area of tertiary education. So I agree with everything that's already been said, and I think the only thing I'd like to add is in terms of thinking about when we are sending lawyers out there into the field, it's not necessarily the big firms anymore, and we need to prepare our students for different opportunities. I know, for example, here at ASU, we are sending out students to Timor-Leste, South Africa, Philippines, and Geneva over the summer so that they can work with public interest groups, they can work with anti-corruption groups, and a whole range of NGOs based in Geneva. And thinking about what legal opportunities look like today is part of their legal innovation. And one other program I'd like to highlight here at ASU, we know, for example, a lot of business gets done on the golf course, and women are less likely to actually take up golf while they're at university or play that as a sport. So we partnered with Ping, and we actually had grads to golf here in the law school. And so we're sending 15 female law students and a couple of male law students out every week with the ASU golf coach so that they get that skill set, so that when they go out to practice, they can join their colleagues on the golf course and actually be a participant in those discussions.
Very interesting. So it seems like innovation takes just a massively wide range of manifestations. I thought maybe I'd cycle back to you, Dean Pritikin. You started by saying the practice of law is very different, and maybe we should talk to this group of students, would-be law students, about ways in which the practice of law is changing, because then that might influence their ways they're thinking about law school.
Thanks. Yeah. So that's a good point. I can't remember now if it was Dean Jarvis said it, but it's not just recent that a lot of people are not going into, big firms. It's long been the case for decades and decades that the vast majority of law school graduates, they don't join big firms when they graduate. They join small firms. They may hang out a shingle and open their own practice. They go into government service. And I think a lot of the traditional law school curriculum and a lot of the law school infrastructure was kind of geared towards funneling people to big firms when that's not where most people go, right? Obviously some of the things that have affected the practice of law are things that have affected other industries, right? Outsourcing overseas, right? There are now, firms in, South Asia that will do document review, all sorts of, things like that. And of course, technology, even before the pandemic, but the pandemic only accelerated it, right? Where virtually everything that lawyers do, they had to figure out how to do online if they weren't already doing it online, right? Court appearances, depositions, trials, client counseling, you name it. And so, everybody's had to figure out how to use Zoom if they didn't already need to know how. But even client communications, right? Confidentiality online, client documents and transfer of client documents, making sure that it's secure and encrypted. Just basic, technological literacy are things that I think a lot of practicing lawyers are not familiar with. I know in law school, I heard it many, many times. People say, well, I wasn't good with numbers. That's why I went to law school. Or, I wasn't good with technology. That's why I went to law school. And, the reality is you can't say that anymore. Right. You have to have some basic literacy in those areas. And so it's incumbent upon law schools to keep up with the changes in the legal profession. One other big topic, which I think is a whole nother topic, so I won't talk about now, which is access to justice and opening up legal services to broader pools of clients. That's a big, big topic, but probably a separate topic. But, that's sort of the tip of the iceberg of the way the legal profession's changed.
Other of my panelists, thoughts on how the profession is changing?
Yeah, I'll jump in here. When I was in law school, no one talked about other professions. It was as if law could solve our clients' problems. And what I learned very quickly is that law alone rarely solves a client's issues. You have to be knowledgeable about other areas, but you also have to understand other professions and how you can interact with them, whether it's business professionals like accountants or tax auditors, whether it's other people who work with those individuals in crisis, like psychologists and psychiatrists or social workers. So I think a lot more law schools are developing interdisciplinary programs where you can gain insight into these other professions, what their code of ethics look like as compared to lawyers, and how you can really work together to provide your client with the more holistic solution to the problems that they're experiencing, or to help them plan to prevent those problems in the future.
Right. That is one of the important goals is you can pick up the pieces after people have driven off the cliff, or you can help them learn how not to drive off the cliff. Well, we've had some mention to technology, and I wonder if Dean Jarvis, would you like to comment at all on kind of how technology is impacting both the practice of law and legal education?
Well, obviously proliferation of Zoom is enormous over the pandemic. But like Dean Pritikin was saying, some of us were doing online learning before the pandemic, which made the transition a little bit easier. In fact, I'm sure at least a couple of my co-panelists do. And to me, the technology is not an end; it's a means. And so if we're getting to more students and we're giving students a different opportunity, either a different way of learning or just being able to learn from a different location or being able to keep teaching despite, everything shutting down. I think that's, to me, the kind of the goal of the technology. Really probably not as well equipped to talk about how technology has changed the active practice of law now. I maybe defer to somebody else on that. But at least for, Caruso law, for us, it's allowed us to launch online programs where we're offering degrees that are not the regular JD degree. And part of the reason we can do that at all is because we can reach so many students, because we can do it online effectively. And that predated Zoom, but I think there's been so much more buy-in from the academic community now post Zoom that it's a pretty common thing now for law schools to at least explore.
So does a good lawyer need to know how to code? Once we start talking about technology, people start worrying about, what degree of knowledge do we think lawyers need to have with respect to technology to be on the cutting edge of innovation? Thoughts from any of my panelists?
Well, we haven't gone so far as to have our students learning how to code, but we do offer a whole range of subjects that are around technology in the law. So we have courses on artificial intelligence, robotics, blockchain, neuroscience in the law. And we're finding more and more our students are gravitating to those type of courses because they know that when they get out into practice, they are going to have questions around blockchain. They are going to have to know what machine learning is and how algorithms work, and that they have to be able to question the biases that are built into those algorithms. So we see technology being obviously a tool that we use at the university, but something that we teach our students about at the same time.
Oh, thank you. That's interesting, because that seems to build on Dean Dickerson's point of kind of a comfort level working with others who may be the actual experts in that particular either technology or field, but having a sufficient comfort level that instead of running in the other direction and saying, I don't do numbers and I don't know how to use a machine, being able to be effective in working with those experts. I did want to cycle back, Dean Bowman, with you. I wonder what your thoughts are on, you mentioned some of your students working abroad. As we think about innovation and changes in the legal profession, internationalization, law crossing boundaries, to what extent is that a part of how one ought to think about innovation in the law?
We definitely think about it a lot. We've been growing our international community in part because we want to expose our domestic students to the idea of norms and cultures and legal instruments outside the US. And that has really inspired our domestic students to actually want to step outside the United States and be exposed to European law or African law, however defined. And so I think with the increased mobility, the fact that people are able to work from home and Zoom into the office, we're going to see greater mobility in the legal profession. And that will actually be across international borders as well across states here in the United States. And I think that's really exciting. The world has definitely got smaller as we went online, and our ability to bring in, for example, guest speakers from Geneva, from London, has definitely enriched our programs. 2 years ago, I doubt we could have got the head of Amnesty International to give a lecture in a class, but Community was very kind enough to Zoom in from Berlin and do that for us. So I think that's a really exciting part about the increased use of technology in the classroom and what exposure that it's giving its students today and tomorrow.
Terrific, thank you. We've had some reference to kind of some of the new kinds of courses that schools are offering. I wonder if there are other thoughts on kind of emerging areas. What's new in the legal curriculum these days? Blockchain, other technology. Other thoughts from my panelists on that? I suppose one way to think about it is, are the things you're seeing in the curriculum today that you didn't see when you were a law student?
Oh, definitely. I mean, we offer courses on cyber law and cybersecurity law, right? Which, obviously the internet was in its infancy, quarter of a century ago. And now, right, it's essential for people to protect their clients' interests, to make sure that they're protecting, customer information, customer data, especially right with the increasing globalization of the economy. You have to comply not only with, U.S. privacy laws, but the GDPR in Europe, right? And again, because my law school is fully online, we have a focus on how you integrate technology into more traditional courses, right? So, for example, alternative dispute resolution, ADR, there's increasing recognition of its importance in the legal profession, right? Because people have this idea that lawyers are all litigators and all litigators are going to trial, when in reality, most lawyers are not litigators, and even litigators are usually resolving cases out of court, through mutual settlement. So we have a course called ADR and Technology, right? How can you not only do negotiations effectively, but do them online, right? We have, a trial advocacy course that we do fully online. We have a moot court program where our students usually never meet each other in person until they fly out to the competition and compete against, brick and mortar schools. So both, new areas of law that reflect changes in society and the economy, as well as trying to update more traditional courses to reflect the way that technology and economic changes are changing those disciplines.
And I'll jump in here and say, I'm seeing both at my current school and at other law schools more courses on critical studies. So critical race studies, critical gender studies. We're in the process of creating a new concentration program on critical intersectionalities, where students have to pick at least 2 areas from disability, citizenship and immigration, gender, sexual identity, and race. And get the different perspective there. So perspectives courses like that are becoming more common. And we're also getting more creative. When I went to law school, I think every class was 3 credits and lasted the entire semester. Now we have mini semesters in January and May, or we have mini courses, sometimes over a couple of weekends, or that run shorter periods of time, where you can really get some topics of current interest, like law and vaccines, for example, during COVID, to give students information about what's actually going on and what the clients are probably calling and asking their attorneys about in the moment.
Terrific, very interesting. These sort of pop-up courses, and some schools from time to time talk about sort of pop-up clinics. I don't know whether any of you have had versions of that at your schools, but responding to, for example, natural disasters, and creating clinical programs for students to respond to those moments of need. Any of my panelists want to give any examples there, just to put some context?
Yeah, so we have there was a big and significant fire in Southern California in the Malibu Valley, Calabasas area called the Woolsey Fire. And we started something called the Disaster Relief Clinic, basically, that arose out of that, to kind of help people who didn't have otherwise a significant and sufficient access to justice, to kind of resolve a lot of the claims that came out of that fire. And actually, we're sort of winding it down now because a lot of those litigations have either settled or proceeded to the point where the disaster relief clinic is not necessary to continue. And so it's exactly what you're talking about, right? It's a pop-up clinic where students can get involved in giving real legal advice and working with lawyers to give real people solve real problems. But it's not an indefinite type thing. And I'm sure something else will come along.
We haven't started pop-up clinics recently, but we just started an eviction defense clinic, and a lot of schools.
I'm sorry, an
eviction defense.
Eviction
defense, and a lot of law schools have done that recently. And I think one thing that law schools are getting much better at doing is modeling some things that we want our graduates to walk away with, being lifelong learners. So not only are we offering classes without credit for students before they enroll, but more of us are offering ongoing classes and opportunities for our graduates afterwards, but also flexibility, because the practice of law changes, areas of law come and go. So the ability to recreate yourself and teach yourself new areas. So I think a lot of law schools are in the mode that we can start things that don't have to go on forever and ever. They can really adapt to what is going on in the world now.
And I take it some of the components of that is teaching, well, as you say, being lifelong learners, but the transferable skills that law school can't cover everything. I mean, one of the things our listeners might take away is a sense of, oh my goodness, how can everything be covered even in 3 years? Vaccine law is big this year, but there may be something else. What's the next thing? So how can students get all of it? And I take part of your message to be that they can't get all of it, but we'll give them exposure to the range of things that will then allow them to be flexible as they enter their practices. I did want to cycle back a little more to talk about what you're seeing in the space. Dean Dickerson, you talked about critical studies, but relatedly with the concerns about access to justice and justice, not just access to it, but whether our system is just, and movements we've seen, as you all well know, a group of deans have posted on the Association of American Law Schools website a set of tools for law schools who are interested in addressing issues of diversity and inclusion in their curricula. And I wonder what what you all would like to add on things that you're seeing in that space. I can call on you, or people can just speak up.
I mean, I don't want to go first each time, so I want to give my co-panelists a chance to jump in first. I certainly have plenty of thoughts on this, though.
We've.
I guess I will then. Access to justice is a big issue. It's actually the reason why I left, a traditional brick and mortar law school to come to a fully online law school, because I saw firsthand how the high cost of legal education could translate to the high cost of legal services. I got my former law school involved in a legal incubator. And so for those who don't know, right, so a legal incubator is designed to help give law school graduates not just the lawyering training, but also the business training to help them launch their own practices. And unlike business incubators, legal incubators always have a focus on access to justice. Participants are encouraged and taught how to keep their overhead low so they can better afford to devote a portion of their practice to pro bono or so-called low bono, right, discounted services to modest needs clients. And, there are millions of Americans who are indigent and can't afford legal services. There are many, many millions, tens of millions of Americans who may not be indigent, but are priced out of the market for legal services where, in metropolitan areas like Los Angeles, where I am, prevailing rates are easily $300 an hour and above. And so I helped get my prior law school involved in an incubator, and I had grads who said, hey, Professor Pritikin, sounds great, but I've got $200,000 in loans. I can't really afford to hang out a shingle and represent the little guy. And so one of the reasons I came to Concord is because since we're fully online, we don't have to support the cost of a campus. We're a third of the cost of traditional schools. We participate in an incubator, and it's much easier for people who graduate with less debt to afford to have more flexibility in terms of what they do when they graduate. And a lot of jurisdictions are considering ways to address the access to justice crisis, right? Some, like California, have been considering, so-called paraprofessional programs where even non-lawyers can provide certain types of legal services in certain circumstances. And, my personal belief is I'm not necessarily against those, but I don't know if they're necessary. If we can find ways to make law school more affordable, we could find ways for legal services to be more affordable, even without looking to non-lawyer options. So I'll get off my soapbox and I'll stop there for now.
So beyond the issues of not alternative licensing or other ways to provide access to justice, I wonder what some of the things you all are seeing in your schools, building a bit on Dean Dickerson, what you said about students who may not have, may not come from families of lawyers, may not find law school has not always been welcoming to students who don't come from a privileged background. And aspects of what we cover in law school can be, traumatizing. If we cover some very difficult topics, because the law deals with some very difficult topics. So I wonder what you're seeing in your schools to address that.
I'll jump in on this one. There's so many things. First, our faculty are engaged in their own ongoing study as individuals and in small groups to really make sure that they remain up to date, understand our diverse students, understand issues about trauma. We had a program at the beginning of the year where we had psychologists come in and talk about trauma and education and ways to deal with that. At my school, we've actually contracted with an outside group, and faculty, they don't have to come through the dean. They could just go voluntarily and get coaching about how to become even better in the classroom, dealing with very challenging issues, making sure that they handle those in a sensitive way. So we have things like that going on. One program, I'll talk about two programs I've started here at my law school. One is called the Dean's Leadership Academy, and I take 10 students every year as my personal mentees. And I pick students who don't have other mentors and are coming typically from those first-gen backgrounds. And I run some formal programs for the group, and then I take them to activities in the community. We've gone to museums. I was fortunate enough to have some discretionary funds. We've gone to see Hamilton here in Los Angeles as a group, opportunities to get them out there and comfortable operating in this world. And I'm also running a 7-part program for graduating students called Bridge to Practice, telling them about things that I never knew about in law school. No one ever told me, and I didn't have that structure to know. So yesterday was a program on how to keep your law license after you get it. And the next one coming up is on event and dining etiquette. So a lot of us are putting on those programs that are supplemental to try to give the education and then to give opportunities to put the education into practice, like going out in the community and having a networking dinner or going to a networking reception.
So Dean Bowman, you have a number of international students and have a range of students, and I wonder maybe you might talk about some of the things you're doing as well.
Certainly. So one of the things we did do in the last academic year was actually add a full-time counsellor to our student success team. And she's very proactive as soon as we notice a student is in distress, and that could be through their GPA ranking or because they've approached a faculty member. We set up one-on-ones, and that's really helped in terms of the mental health and well-being of our student body. We recognise that we have our most diverse class in history. Many of them are first-generation students. And so we've set up 2 funding opportunities to allow those students who would like to do non-paid internships or externships over the summer or through a semester to actually do so. One of it's called Pay It Forward, where they realistically borrow from the law school with the commitment that they will pay back that funds once they're out in the workplace. And it's a non-binding contract, so students don't feel overwhelmed with it. But we're finding already that students who are out there in their first year of practice are paying the $100 per month in order to put back into the fund. We also have a public interest fellowship scheme, whereby students who do get these phenomenal opportunities that are unpaid can apply to and get one of 10 $10,000 scholarships to allow them to actually take up that opportunity and pursue their passion. On the international community front, we're really lucky. We have the Thunderbird School of Global Management literally next door to the law school. So we've created an international community across the 2 schools. And as recently as Valentine's Day, I actually hosted an event that included 100 international students from around 25 different countries, and we decorated cookies and had a cookie judging competition. What's fabulous for that is we might have 1 student from Saudi Arabia, but Thunderbird has 5. And suddenly we've got these connections where these students feel like they've got a network and a sense of home in their backyard. And it's been really lovely to see the relationships that have actually built across the 2 schools. We're actually doing a lot of cross-listing, or we'll be hoping to do cross-listing with Thunderbird in the next academic year. So we'll have their international students in our classes as well as domestic students, and really creating this synergy across these 2 great facilities. And so we're really excited by that for all of our students.
Terrific, thank you. I'm going to pick up on one of the questions I see in the question. Well, for someone interested in legal academia, how to think about innovation, which areas are the next big thing? So what's the next big thing, which may be a different question than how best to situate yourself for legal academia. So let's start with what's the next big thing. What's your crystal ball saying? And then we'll talk about legal academia. Next big thing?
In the legal profession generally, you're saying?
Sounds like the question. Yes. This
is a very advanced pre-law student that's thinking ahead to their academic career already. You know, the big thing right now is DEI stuff, or diversity, equity, inclusion, I'd say. All of our law schools are, if we don't already have them, implementing anti-bias training, diversity, and cross-cultural competency classes. And I think most of us were already doing that to some extent, but I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity there. And I wouldn't even limit it to legal academics, even for people who are either practicing law or going to law school and not going to practice as an attorney, but are interested in cross-cultural competencies, ombuds, dispute resolution, the kind of stuff that has to happen inside a company to make people from different cultures get along and to demonstrate why diversity is so valuable in the workplace. To me, that's the big thing of the moment. I don't have a crystal ball for 10 years from now, but for right now, to me, that's the big thing in the moment.
And just to elaborate a bit on that, I think it reflects a recognition that we, as lawyers, people will be serving an increasingly diverse population. And if you want to be an effective lawyer, you have to be effective. And to be effective, you have to be able to communicate and understand your clients that may come with backgrounds and premises and understandings that are not the same as yours. And so, those who worked in the international space have known that for a long time, that there are different expectations and understandings of even what it means to present yourself as a professional. But that's not limited to the international arena. And I think law schools are increasingly understanding that. And Dean Jarvis, as you put it, that schools are trying to offer better education to prepare students for that reality.
So what I think the next big thing in the legal profession is going to be, and I think it's definitely going to affect law schools, is regulatory changes, right? Already you're seeing these historic barriers to non-lawyer ownership of law firms and, tax professionals and others who couldn't do something that's called the practice of law, right? Those lines are starting to blur. At the same time, I think in the last few years, we've started to see some real questioning about the barriers to enter the legal profession. I'm talking primarily about the bar exam, right? When the pandemic happened, a lot of jurisdictions delayed their exam. Many did online. And although there were, it was not without its snafus, a lot of people liked the option to take it online, even if they weren't, some people didn't like they were required to take it online, but people liked the option. Nevertheless, the National Conference of Bar Examiners, which is the national entity that writes the multi-state bar exam, the multiple choice half of the bar exam that virtually every state uses, they were nervous about going online. And so they said, okay, well, now the pandemic seems like it's cooling off. We're going to go back to in-person only. And a lot of people have pushed against that. In fact, the format aside, a lot of people have questioned, does the bar exam even test what it takes to be a good lawyer? Is it even a valid test for entry into the legal profession? And this is critical because, in California, which has one of the highest cut scores in the nation, repeated studies have shown that its artificially high cut score is disproportionately keeping minorities out of the legal profession. And so there's an even higher burden to be able to justify why are we making people take this exam when it may not actually test for what we care about and it may be having negative effects. So, movements like that take a while to build momentum, but I think the seeds are there. And I think we are going to see, maybe not in the next year or two, but over the next decade, we're going to see more jurisdictions dramatically changing the content of the bar exam, even maybe whether they even have a bar exam as a barrier to licensure. And that's something that law schools obviously are going to have to take notice of.
My answer was going to echo part of what Dean Pritikin said. Part of the future is thinking about a world in which lawyers aren't quite as special as we are, or at least think we are now, because other professions are eroding or encroaching or joining, depending on their perspective, and are gaining the ability through legal changes and regulatory changes to do some of the things that lawyers have always had the space to do. So I like to think about it as, what can we as people do who are law trained that an accountant might not be able to do? What can we do as humans that a machine can't do? And a lot of that is getting very good about counseling. And that's where some of these interdisciplinary things come in. The other thing about the future, I don't have a crystal ball either, but law touches everything. Just look around you. There's something in your office or home. A lawyer had something to do with part of that. So look at the emerging industries. Cannabis law. People now need answers to that. And as laws change on that, we'll need more lawyers who can do it. Esports. Okay. What is that? And what are the legal issues? We're going to need people. So keep your eye out on the trends going on in the world, and they're going to need a lawyer for that.
So actually, Dean Dixon, your comments raised for me the question of programs that schools may be running to help students actually adopt what I would think of as an innovative or entrepreneurial mindset. Aside from the law, are there ways to train and educate students to be entrepreneurial? I don't necessarily mean start a business. One can be entrepreneurial in how you run a nonprofit. You can be entrepreneurial within the government of understanding limited resources and how to use them better. Well, are there programs out there that may help students in that regard?
I think there definitely are. And there are a lot of different ways to approach it. We have one thing that's different from when I went to law school is you can actually customize your degree much more. We have concentrations and customizations, and we actually have one in entrepreneurship, as do other schools. Some schools have dual degrees, so you can work with the business, get a degree in the business school, get a degree in the law school. But I think we offer a lot of opportunities. We offer a lot of student organizations. We offer the opportunity to create new student organizations. How entrepreneurial is that? We offered the ability at my school to create new community service projects. Students can come with the ideas to do that. We provide funding, again, for students to think about going out and learning things outside of the law school, and they can then come back and say, let's implement this. So having a culture that allows students input and the ability to change their law school environment and the external environment, I think is important. And I think a lot of law schools are doing some or a variety of these types of things.
So I wonder, we've told students about lots of things that are going on. How should a prospective law student sort through all this? How do they figure out what's the right place for them, and which innovations might make a difference? Thoughts on that for our audience here?
Oh, yeah. Well, and I have two ideas, one sort of big picture, one more personal, right? So one is look beyond U.S. News and World Report. Law school deans almost uniformly hate it, and they all almost uniformly do what they can to try and move up in the rankings. It's this catch-22, and it's completely cyclical because a big chunk of the U.S. News and World rankings is reputation. And a big chunk of reputation is U.S. News and World rankings. I've, gotten those surveys that you fill out, and most of what I know about most law schools is their U.S. News and World ranking, right? So that's a self-reinforcing system, which doesn't tell you much about the quality or whether it has something that would appeal to a particular student. I would say ask an admissions advisor, talk to someone who's been through the program, and tell the admissions advisor, what you're interested in, or, what area of law you want to go into, or something about your background, so they can put you in touch with someone who has a relevant experience, life experience, professional experience. They'll probably put you in touch with someone who had a great time and is really successful. And so they're going to say great things about the school, but at least you'll get a better window into what it's really like to go through the school than, whatever the sales pitch would be.
Dean Jarvis, thoughts on how prospective students can sort through all this?
Let me make a broad point first, which is I don't think you could go wrong with most law schools. Especially, everybody on this panel, you can tell we're all putting a lot of work and thought and effort into making law school a great experience holistically, not just giving you the law. I like to tell students when they start that the law is fungible. You're going to get the same textbooks from everybody. Most professors really care about their students and are trying to teach them effectively, to be honest. But the character of the law school and kind of the feel to it, that differs in different places, and you're going to be happier in one place or another. So it's really worth talking to people and visiting if you can. Going and really talking to as many current students as you can, professors, go sit in the class. I mean, all of that sounds like a lot of work, but I do it. The only other thing I'd add is, for Pepperdine, at least, we mean what we say when we put it down in writing. So I would read the materials carefully. I'm always surprised at how many people show up at Pepperdine and they say, oh, I didn't know you were a religious school. And I say, really? Because it's in like the first sentence of our description. And not everybody who comes here is religious, and we welcome people of all faiths and none. But it still surprises me when people say that, because I think it's literally on the first page of the document. And so, if a school says that we care about social justice, they do. Believe them. When you get there, they're probably doing a lot of interesting and important stuff in that realm. And so that's kind of my two big points there.
Dean Dickerson, go for it.
Yeah. No one ever told me when I went to law school, and many of you are probably smarter about this, they never said, think about where you want to practice law and look very carefully at schools in that geographic area, because if you go to a school in the place you want to practice, you can start building those professional and personal relationships right away in law school and get a leg up. It doesn't mean that everyone in a particular school stays there, but I think geography is definitely a consideration in addition to the innovation points we're talking about. But I agree with what the others have said. We all spend a lot of time putting things up on our websites. Our admissions offices are still offering a lot of online programs, so you don't even have to travel. I think it's always good to see where you're going to be if that's possible. But being able to interact with current law students or recent graduates is really important. Being able to see a class. You can ask to sit in on a class, whether live or a lot of us are still doing some things online. Take advantage of those opportunities. Going to law school is a huge investment. So putting the time in on the front end to find a place that really matches your values and that you feel like it's going to support you and your goals and your professional growth is really important.
Dean Bowman, thoughts on this?
I would just echo everything that my colleagues have said. Coming on campus and actually spending time meeting those current students, seeing how accessible faculty are, that gives you the best insight of what those next 3 years are likely to be. I also think it's important to have a look at if the law school sits within a university, looking at what else that university offers, where can you plug in, how does that fit with your interests as well. And I love the idea of thinking about your professional networks and where you want to be. I think given you are making that investment, spending that time and thinking, do I want to be East Coast, West Coast? Do I like the snow? Do I like the heat? Is really important. But I think, as you've heard today, there are amazing options out there and you really can't go wrong, or too wrong, I should say.
So I'm looking to see on our questions. Sorry, I'm just reading. Based on social justice and technology societies, I really agree that legal innovations are changing the world. Society is moving to digital marketing. But how does a law student get this opportunity at the right time? I'm just trying. I'm feeling someone typed in on their iPhone and I'm deciphering it. I think I take the question to be sort of understanding that on the one hand, law schools are trying to respond to innovation, but the legal profession actually remains relatively conservative. I don't mean politically, but just a lot doesn't change. What's the right balance, both for the law student looking to understand that they're moving into a profession that changes? Lots has changed, but lots hasn't changed. And what should you be looking for in the law school for the right balance there?
Well, as we've discussed, the pandemic has changed the practice of law as well. So a lot of things that lawyers were resistant to or scared of, they've come around to. And I read every day a lot of the changes with regard to online proceedings and dealing with clients in the cloud are going to be here to stay. I think most law schools take an approach where we teach you how the people we know you're going to be working with, the people who've come ahead of you, what they're going to expect, and make sure you understand how to manage up to them and work with them and clients who are of that generation. But we also give you the space and the encouragement to say, change the profession. This is your opportunity because you guys are going to be so good and have better skills in things like technology than those who came before you. This is the opportunity to be a leader early on in your profession. So giving you the skills to do that, the encouragement and the confidence to do that, I think is what a lot of us are trying to balance out.
Thank you. It's a terrific point, and I see it reflected in one of the earlier questions. And Dean Dickerson, you had mentioned the programming on wellness and well-being for your students. My sense is that at least the profession is starting to notice that it has to be attentive to the well-being of its professionals. And I wonder if there are ways for law students to actually help lead the way in both in the DEI space, diversity and inclusion space, and the wellness space for our graduates who are about to enter the profession. Any thoughts or reflections on that?
Yeah, absolutely. The American Bar Association, which is the national association for lawyers, regardless of where you're licensed to practice or the type of law you practice, has really made attorney well-being and mental health priority. So more and more legal employers are adopting programs and becoming more cognizant about things like what causes burnout, how can we be more inclusive and address the needs of our employees and our clients who are diverse in one way or another. And a lot of the change is because of law students. They're asking the tough questions. They're choosing to work for places that reflect their values and not choosing to work for other places. So if the other places want to get the best talent, they have to adapt. And then we are, inviting and encouraging the new generations of lawyers to work with us and to help us learn how to be better as professionals and as people too.
Right. I'll put in a small boast, I suppose, about one of our 3L students a couple of years ago who successfully persuaded the Virginia Board of Bar Examiners to change one of their questions about mental health, so that we did not inadvertently discourage students from seeking out mental health care for fear that somehow that would interfere with their ability to get bar licensed. So I am seeing our students and young graduates push for change and sometimes be successful.
Well, that raises a good point, Dean Perdue, and it kind of goes back to your prior question about the right balance regarding, innovation in a conservative profession. And it makes me think of an analogy. There's this important principle that you'll learn about in law school, right? Stare decisis, the idea of respect for precedent, is that once something has been established, we're reluctant to change it, right? There's value in continuity. However, as you'll learn, right, even under stare decisis, you're not locked into following the past. You can, under principle of stare decisis, go against precedent if there's good reason to do so. And I think one of the things that law students today are recognizing is that there's good reason to do so, right? Not just the rate of change within technological innovation, but just societal changes. They're accelerating at an exponential pace. And I think law sometimes struggles to adapt. But as the new generation of law students comes in and you recognize the need for change and you push for that change can happen faster. And as law students graduate and they start to fill those positions of leadership in law firms and government and the ABA, right? I think you'll be able to effectuate change more dramatically, more rapidly. So you have to respect that, those you're dealing with now, they may be somewhat resistant, but, that shouldn't prevent you from pushing to make the changes that need to happen and should happen.
And I guess I'd just add more broadly, law and law training is a terrific platform from which to make changes, not only within the legal profession, but within all of society. To follow up on Dean Dickerson's point, law is everywhere. It impacts everything from our most private relationships, family, to the most public. The nature of our government and our social interactions. So it's a great platform to make all kinds of change. We're coming down to our final couple of minutes. I don't know whether anyone has any final reflections on innovation in law school or innovation in the legal profession. We've covered a fair amount of territory. Dean Jarvis?
Glad students were even asking these questions and thinking about it. We think about it because this is our vocation and has been for a while. But students coming in and thinking, oh, what kind of law schools are trying to innovate and keep up with technology and keep up with changes in society and keep up with changes in, the legal market. I think those are great and sophisticated questions to be asking before you've even started law school.
A final point I thought of is we trained students to ask good questions to help analyze problems. So I encourage students, ask questions of us. Ask the questions that are important to you because you want to find the best fit possible. Not only will you be with us 2, 3, or 4 years, depending on the program, you'll actually be with us the rest of your life because you're part of our community. So you want to make sure that you pick a school that, again, matches your goals and your values. So ask the questions, ask us what we're doing to make us innovative. We won't shy away from giving you the good answers.
Terrific. Well, I see that Andrew's joining us. I think we're about we're at 3:46, so I guess we've gone a minute over. But many thanks to our terrific panel for your insights. I hope all our student participants have found it a useful program.
Thanks so much for the opportunity to participate. This was great.
Yes, thank you so much.
Andrew, anything we need to do except to say?
I just wanted to thank you guys for such a fascinating discussion. I think it was really beneficial for the panel and for all of the attendees today. So we thank you so much for your thoughts today. We hope it's been an educational and entertaining day for you, attendees, and hope that it helps you make more educated decision about where to go to law school and what will be beneficial for your career path moving forward. So we just want to conclude by thanking our sponsors, Southern Illinois University School of Law, UConn School of Law, and University of Houston Law Center. Once again, thank you and good luck in your legal career.
Take care, everyone.
Thanks.